Calla Bennett is 63 years old, a retired school teacher who spent most of her life nurturing young minds. She's always been the picture of health, or so she thought. Her days were filled with teaching, gardening, and taking long walks through the local park with her golden retriever, Daisy. But a few months ago, Calla started feeling unusually tired. It wasn't just the normal exhaustion after a busy day. It was a deeper fatigue, a heaviness in her bones that didn't seem to lift no matter how much sleep she got. It was during one of these moments, sitting in her doctor's office, when the warning came. Her blood pressure was high and her cholesterol levels were creeping up, inching dangerously toward the realm of heart disease. The doctor told her it was time to make some serious changes, or she might find herself battling more than just fatigue. That moment hit Calla hard. She had always thought of herself as someone in control, someone who had taken good care of her health. Yet here she was, staring at a list of medical numbers that painted a grim picture. But something about that doctor's warning stirred something in her, a small spark of hope. She wasn't ready to just let things slide. She wasn't ready to accept this new reality of feeling sluggish and frail. Determined to turn things around, Calla decided to embark on a journey of healing, and it all began with something as simple as garlic. At first, it seemed almost too easy, 2 cloves of garlic a day. It felt almost too simple to be true. But Calla had nothing to lose. She started incorporating garlic into her meals, using it in her morning smoothies, sprinkling it on salads, and even making garlic-infused water to sip throughout the day. The transformation wasn't immediate, but slowly, over the weeks, Calla began to notice subtle shifts. Her energy started to return, little by little. The fatigue that once weighed her down began to lift, and she started feeling more like her old self again. It wasn't just the energy, though. Her mood improved too. Calla hadn't realized how much the stress of her health concerns had been affecting her until she started feeling lighter, more at ease. As the months went by, she not only noticed improvements in her energy and mood, but her next doctor's visit brought more good news. Her cholesterol was lower, her blood pressure was more stable, and the doctor even praised her for the healthier habits she had embraced. But it wasn't just about the physical changes. Calla's mindset had transformed as well. She realized that taking control of her health didn't require drastic, overwhelming changes. It was the small, consistent steps, like incorporating something as simple as garlic into her routine, that made all the difference. Now, Calla feels empowered. She's living proof that sometimes it's the simplest natural remedies that can make the biggest impact. Her story isn't about perfection, but about finding the courage to face challenges head-on and make small, meaningful changes that lead to a better, healthier life. And for Calla, it all started with those 2 cloves of garlic. Calla had always considered herself a healthy woman. Even in her early 60s, she felt strong and independent, spending hours tending to her garden, walking Daisy through the neighborhood, and enjoying time with her children when they visited. But over the past few months, something had begun to shift. What started as mild fatigue had slowly morphed into an overwhelming tiredness she couldn't shake off no matter how much she rested. She would find herself sitting down after a walk, feeling as though the simple task had drained her energy completely. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was mental too. She became irritable, snapping at loved ones when they asked how she was doing. Her son, Jason, noticed it first. He'd always been close to his mother, and he knew when something was off. One Sunday afternoon, as they sat together over a cup of tea, he gently suggested that maybe it was time to see the doctor. "Mom, you're not yourself," he said, his voice laced with concern. "You've been tired for too long. It's more than just age catching up with you." Reluctantly, Calla agreed, although in her heart, she didn't want to admit that something was wrong. When she walked into her doctor's office, she didn't expect the news she received. The blood tests revealed that her cholesterol levels were higher than they should be, and her blood pressure was climbing steadily. Her doctor, Dr. Stevens, had a calm but firm demeanor. "You need to make some changes, Calla," he said gently. "These numbers are pointing in a direction we don't want to go. Heart disease, stroke, even diabetes. These things are all linked to what you're facing now. Let's start by changing your diet and lifestyle." Those words hit Calla like a ton of bricks. She had always taken care of herself, eating well and staying active, but now her body was telling her something she hadn't seen coming. The doctor handed her a piece of paper with suggestions for dietary changes and recommended she start exercising more. "This is manageable," Dr. Stevens reassured her, "but you have to take control now." As she left the doctor's office, the weight of it all sank in. She sat quietly in her car, feeling a deep sense of frustration and disbelief. How could she have let it get this bad? More importantly, what could she do now to turn things around? Her mind raced, but there was no clear answer, only a nagging feeling that perhaps the solution wasn't as complicated as it seemed. What if the answer had been right under her nose all along? What if a small, simple change could help restore the energy and vitality she once had? That night, as she sat at the dinner table with her family, Jason again suggested something that would change everything. "Mom, I read about this natural remedy. Garlic. It's supposed to help with cholesterol and heart health." Calla laughed lightly, dismissing it at first, but Jason wasn't deterred. "It's true, Mom. It's actually been used for centuries for its health benefits. Just try it. 2 cloves a day, that's all." It was a small, almost absurd suggestion, but in her heart, Calla felt a flicker of hope. Could this really be the answer? Could something as simple as garlic help her reclaim her health? That night, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would start. The following morning, Calla stood in her kitchen, staring at the small cloves of garlic on the counter. She had always loved the aroma of garlic in her meals, but had never thought of it as a health miracle. Yet, here she was, ready to give it a try. She peeled 2 fresh cloves, their sharp scent filling the air, and with a little hesitation, she popped them into her mouth, chewing them slowly as the strong flavor danced on her tongue. It wasn't the most pleasant experience, but she had committed to doing this. She could handle it for her health. That evening, Jason came over to check on her progress. Calla laughed lightly when he asked, "So, how's the garlic going?" She wiped her hands on a dish towel, the warmth of the kitchen surrounding her. "Honestly, it's not as bad as I thought," she said, though the taste still lingered in the back of her throat. "But I'm not sure what to expect. I mean, it's just garlic, right?" Jason smiled, clearly pleased by her willingness to try. "It's more than just garlic, Mom. It's the allicin, the compound that gets released when it's crushed or chopped. That's what makes garlic so special. It's like nature's medicine." Calla nodded, trying to absorb the information, but what Jason said next stuck with her. "It's a small change, but small changes can add up, Mom. You've always taught me that." As the days passed, Calla made garlic a part of her daily routine. She added it to her meals, sometimes raw, sometimes lightly cooked, whatever was easiest. She even started drinking garlic-infused water in the mornings, convinced that this small change could make a big difference. At first, there were no noticeable shifts. The fatigue didn't magically disappear, and she still felt the pull of exhaustion in the afternoons. But there was something else happening, something subtle, almost imperceptible. One afternoon, about a week into her new routine, Calla found herself walking Daisy in the park, something she hadn't been able to do without taking frequent breaks just a few days ago. As they strolled along the familiar path, Calla noticed something she hadn't felt in weeks: energy. It wasn't the kind of energy she remembered from her younger years, when she could walk for hours without tiring, but it was there nonetheless. She didn't need to stop for a break. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her skin and the rhythmic sound of her footsteps as they echoed on the pavement. She couldn't quite explain it, but there was a sense of lightness in her body, as though the heaviness of the past months had begun to lift. She had only been doing this garlic routine for a week, but something was different. Maybe it was the placebo effect, she thought, or maybe it was the garlic after all. Whatever it was, she wasn't about to stop now. That night, she spoke with her daughter, Emily, about the change. Emily had always been supportive of her health choices, and Calla could see the concern in her eyes when she mentioned the doctor's warning. "Mom, you've been looking better," Emily remarked over dinner, noticing the glow in her mother's cheeks. "I don't know what it is, but there's something different about you. You seem lighter." It felt good to hear that. For the first time in a while, Calla felt like she was on the right track. She wasn't in perfect health yet, but she had started something that made her feel hopeful. And in that moment, she realized it wasn't just about garlic, it was about taking control. It was about making the decision to change, even when the road ahead wasn't clear. The garlic was just the beginning. As the days went by, Calla grew more comfortable with her new routine. It wasn't just about the garlic anymore. It was about the shift in her mindset, choosing to fight back against the fatigue, the worry, and the doctor's warning. She realized that small, intentional changes could build up over time, and she wasn't going to let fear define the rest of her life. In her heart, Calla knew this was only the start of her journey, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of excitement, a glimmer of possibility. And that, she realized, was the real transformation. It had been 2 weeks since Calla had started her garlic regimen. The initial discomfort of eating raw garlic had faded, and she had begun to notice small but significant changes. One morning, as she walked down the stairs to the kitchen, she found herself thinking about how easy it was to get up. She hadn't even thought about it until now, but she realized that it wasn't as difficult to get out of bed anymore. The stiffness in her joints, which had been a constant companion for months, was easing. It was the kind of change that was so gradual she almost missed it. At first, Calla had chalked it up to just another phase. Maybe it was the weather changing, or maybe the extra sleep had done the trick. But no, it wasn't that simple. She could feel it. Her mornings weren't as sluggish, her afternoons weren't as draining. She was finding herself getting through the day without the deep, overwhelming exhaustion that had plagued her for so long. One afternoon, as she was in the middle of preparing lunch, she found herself moving around the kitchen more energetically than she had in months. The once daunting task of chopping vegetables and preparing a meal now seemed like second nature. She wasn't just getting through the motions, she was enjoying the process. Her daughter, Emily, stopped by to drop off some groceries and noticed the change immediately. "Mom, you're moving around like you're in your 50s, she said, her voice filled with surprise. Calla smiled, but inside she felt a swell of pride. She wasn't where she wanted to be yet, but she could see the progress. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Calla told Emily about the garlic, how it had started out as a small change and was now beginning to show results. Emily listened intently, impressed by how something so simple had made such a difference. "You know, I've read a lot about natural remedies," Emily said thoughtfully, "but I never imagined garlic could do this much. I think I'll start trying it too." Calla's heart swelled with a quiet joy. She hadn't expected this ripple effect, but here it was. A small decision she made for her own health was inspiring those around her to think more seriously about their well-being. She didn't need grand gestures to make an impact. Sometimes it was the little, consistent choices that mattered most. She was careful not to get ahead of herself. She didn't want to expect too much, too soon. She knew that lasting change took time and patience. But in the quiet moments when she reflected on how far she had come, it was impossible to ignore the transformation that was already taking place. There was another win Calla didn't expect. Her relationship with food had started to shift. For years, she'd been someone who relied on convenience and comfort foods when life got busy. But now, she found herself wanting to cook from scratch more often, seeking out ingredients that nourished her body. It wasn't just about the garlic anymore, it was about the way she was learning to appreciate food as medicine. Each meal became a moment of connection to herself, a reminder that she had the power to make choices that supported her well-being. The more Calla embraced this new mindset, the more she saw it affecting every part of her life. She didn't feel as anxious about the future anymore. She could still have moments of worry, of course. Life wasn't perfect, but there was a quiet confidence growing inside her. It was as though she had taken the wheel of her life again, and for the first time in a long while, it felt good to be in control. Garlic wasn't just helping her body, it was helping her mindset. Each small, seemingly insignificant decision was adding up to something bigger than she could have ever anticipated. That night, as Calla sat down to a quiet dinner by herself, she realized something she hadn't noticed before. She was no longer just surviving each day, she was living again, and that realization, that small win, felt more important than anything else. Calla's life had taken on a new rhythm over the past month. The garlic had become a fixture in her daily routine, and with each passing day, she felt stronger. But it wasn't just the garlic, she had been making other changes as well. She had started walking every morning, not for miles, but just enough to feel the wind on her face and the warmth of the sun on her skin. She had also begun paying more attention to what she ate, opting for fresh vegetables, lean proteins, and whole grains. It was all about the little things, the quiet choices that built momentum over time. When it was time for her follow-up appointment with Dr. Stevens, Calla went in with a mixture of nerves and quiet optimism. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, the changes she had made would be enough to make a difference. As she sat in the waiting room, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come in such a short time. It had only been a month, but it felt like a lifetime of small victories had passed since that first day she decided to try garlic. When Dr. Stevens walked in, he greeted her with a warm smile. "Calla, it's good to see you," he said. "How have you been feeling?" His question was simple, but it carried an underlying sense of concern. Calla took a deep breath before responding. "I feel better," she said, surprised at how easy the words came. "I've been making some changes, adding garlic to my diet, walking more, paying attention to what I eat." She hesitated, not sure if the doctor would dismiss it as too small a change to make a real impact. But Dr. Stevens nodded thoughtfully, as if he had already heard this before. "Let's take a look at your numbers," he said, motioning for Calla to sit back while he checked her chart. As he reviewed the results from her last visit, Calla could see the subtle shift in his demeanor. His brow furrowed slightly, and then his face softened into a smile. "Well, Calla, it seems that your efforts have paid off. Your blood pressure is lower and your cholesterol is improving. Keep doing what you're doing. These numbers are moving in the right direction." Calla's heart lifted in her chest. She hadn't expected such positive news. The fatigue that had once weighed so heavily on her seemed like a distant memory now, and hearing the doctor's approval made her feel like all the small sacrifices were worth it. She felt validated, like she wasn't just guessing her way through this process. She was making real progress. But there was something else the doctor said that stuck with her long after the appointment was over. "It's not just about garlic, Calla," he had said. "It's about the lifestyle changes you've made. Those small things, the walking, the attention to your diet, they all matter, and the fact that you're sticking with them, that's the real key to long-term health." As Calla left the doctor's office, she felt a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the garlic, but about her commitment to herself. The small changes she had made were adding up to something bigger than she had ever imagined. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly empowered. When she got home, Calla sat down with a cup of tea and thought about the journey she had been on. She wasn't perfect, and there were still days when the tiredness tried to creep back in. But she knew that now she had the tools to fight it. She wasn't just a victim of her health anymore. She was an active participant in her well-being. And that, more than anything, was what gave her the confidence to keep moving forward. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "How did it go with the doctor, Mom?" Calla smiled as she typed back, "It went really well. I'm on the right track, and I think it's the garlic and all the little changes that are making a difference." Emily's reply came almost immediately. "I knew it. You've got this, Mom." Calla felt a rush of warmth in her chest. She wasn't alone on this journey. She had her family by her side, cheering her on, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. As the weeks passed, Calla continued her routine with a sense of ease. Garlic had become an integral part of her daily meals, but it was more than just the garlic itself. It was the mindset shift that had followed. She had learned to take ownership of her health in ways she hadn't done before. It wasn't about perfection, it was about consistency. And those small, seemingly insignificant choices were starting to add up in a way that felt empowering. One Sunday afternoon, Calla was in the kitchen preparing her weekly meal prep. She had just finished chopping vegetables when she paused, taking a moment to reflect on how different things were now. A year ago, she might have grabbed takeout or thrown something quick together, but now, preparing a healthy meal felt like an act of self-love. She had always thought that making healthier choices meant drastic changes, cutting out all the foods she loved or signing up for an intense exercise regimen. But she had learned that small, sustainable changes were far more powerful. Her daughter Emily had noticed the change too. "Mom, you've been really consistent with this," she remarked one evening as they were cleaning up after dinner. "You're not just eating better, you're glowing, and you're walking every morning. I don't think I've ever seen you this committed." Calla smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's the small stuff, Em. It's the little things I didn't think mattered that are making the difference. I used to think it was all about big changes, some drastic diet or intense workout. But now I realize it's just consistency. 2 cloves of garlic a day, a walk every morning, cooking instead of grabbing fast food. Those little things are what are really adding up." The more Calla thought about it, the more she realized how true that was. The garlic wasn't just a magical solution, it was a symbol of her newfound commitment. She wasn't just waiting for something to change, she was taking action. Each meal, each walk, each mindful choice was building a foundation for better health. And she didn't need to do it all at once. It was the consistency of the small changes that had the most power. A few days later, she went for her regular checkup. As she sat in the doctor's office, waiting for her results, she felt calm. She knew that no matter what the numbers showed, she had done her part. Dr. Stevens walked in with a kind smile and a clipboard. He reviewed her test results, then looked up at her with a soft expression. "Calla, I have to say, I'm impressed. Your numbers are looking better, your blood pressure has dropped even more, and your cholesterol is down. Your consistency is paying off." Calla felt a wave of relief wash over her. "It's just the little things," she replied with a smile. 2 cloves of garlic every day, a walk each morning. Nothing drastic, but it's making a difference." Dr. Stevens nodded, his eyes filled with approval. "That's the secret, Calla. It's not about drastic changes. It's about making the right choices, day after day. You've done an excellent job." As Calla left the doctor's office, she felt a deep sense of pride in herself. It wasn't just the numbers that mattered, it was the way she felt. She had made a commitment to her health, and those small, consistent choices had already made a world of difference. At home, she sat down with a cup of tea and reflected on her journey. She wasn't at the finish line yet, but she was closer than she had ever been. And most importantly, she felt empowered. The power didn't lie in grand gestures, it lay in the small, daily actions that built a life of health and vitality. The next morning, Calla woke up, ready to face the day, knowing that the small changes she had made had already transformed her in ways she couldn't have imagined. She was not only reclaiming her health, but also rediscovering herself in the process. The garlic was just the beginning, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive. As the months passed, Calla's transformation continued. She found herself waking up each day with a sense of purpose, her energy levels higher than they had been in years. It was as if she had discovered a hidden well of strength that had been there all along, waiting for her to tap into it. Garlic, once a simple kitchen staple, had become a powerful symbol of her journey. It wasn't just about eating 2 cloves a day anymore. It was about embracing the process of gradual, steady improvement. It was about taking small steps, day after day, and trusting that those steps would lead to something better. One evening, as Calla sat down to dinner with her family, she realized just how much had changed. The meal in front of her wasn't just nutritious, it was a celebration of everything she had learned. Her plate was filled with fresh vegetables, lean protein, and a generous serving of garlic. She had learned to savor the food she put in her body, knowing that it wasn't just fuel, it was the foundation of her health. Her son, Jason, sat across from her, watching her with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You know, Mom," he began, "you're looking better than you've looked in years. It's not just your health either. There's a lightness about you. You seem content." Calla smiled, the words filling her heart with warmth. "I feel content," she said softly. "I've learned to take care of myself in a way I never did before. It's not about being perfect, but about showing up for myself every day." Garlic was the starting point, but it's the lifestyle changes that have made the difference. The walks, the meals, the mindset shifts, it's all adding up. Her family looked at her with a newfound respect. They had watched her go through the ups and downs, but now they were witnessing a woman who had taken control of her life again. They could see the confidence in her, the way she carried herself, and the peace she radiated. This wasn't just about physical health, it was about reclaiming her sense of self. As Calla's journey continued, she became more involved in her community. She joined a local wellness group where she shared her story with others who were going through similar struggles. It wasn't long before she became known as someone who had found the secret to feeling better without resorting to extreme measures. Her story was one of small, intentional choices, a story that resonated with many. Calla didn't see herself as a health expert, but she had become a symbol of what it meant to take charge of one's health, regardless of age. She wasn't ashamed of her journey. In fact, she wore it with pride. She had fought against fatigue, against doubt, and against the weight of her doctor's warning, and she had emerged stronger for it. One morning, as she walked through the park with Daisy, Calla paused at the top of the hill and took a deep breath. The sun was rising, casting a soft glow over the path. She felt strong, not just physically, but emotionally. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. In those quiet moments, she realized that the real transformation wasn't in the numbers on a medical chart, it was in the way she viewed herself and her health. For the first time in a long time, Calla understood that health wasn't just about avoiding illness. It was about embracing life, making choices that supported her well-being, and living with intention. The garlic had been the catalyst, but it was the way she had shifted her perspective, embraced the small changes, and stayed consistent that had made all the difference. As she continued her walk, Calla felt a sense of pride and gratitude wash over her. She had created this new chapter of her life, a chapter filled with vitality, confidence, and a deep sense of purpose. And she knew without a doubt that she had the power to continue writing her own story, one small choice at a time. Calla's transformation wasn't just physical, it was a complete shift in how she approached life. As she embraced her new routine, the once overwhelming fatigue and uncertainty about her health became distant memories. She had found her stride, and now she wanted to share the lessons she had learned with those around her. It wasn't just about garlic or any one thing, it was about how even the smallest changes, when made consistently, could create lasting impact. One evening, Calla found herself sitting in her living room with a group of women from her community wellness group. The conversation had naturally drifted to the topic of health, and Calla shared her story, how a simple change like eating 2 cloves of garlic a day had opened the door to a deeper transformation. Her words were met with quiet nods of understanding and curiosity. These women, some older than Calla and some younger, all had their own struggles, be it weight gain, low energy, or the stress of caring for aging parents. "What made you stick with it?" one woman asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "How did you not give up when it didn't seem to work right away?" Calla smiled softly, leaning forward. "I think it was the small wins, the ones that didn't seem important at first. At first, it was just the garlic, one small thing. But then I noticed that I felt a little lighter, a little more energized. Then I started walking more, eating better. And slowly, I realized I wasn't just changing my body, I was changing my mindset. I was taking control of my health in a way I hadn't before." Another woman, Patricia, raised an eyebrow. "I always thought it was too late for me. I've tried so many things over the years, and nothing stuck." Calla nodded understandingly. "I know how you feel, but I think that's where we go wrong, looking for one big solution, one drastic change. What I learned is that it's the small, consistent choices that matter. And no matter where you're starting from, you can always start with one small thing." The room was quiet for a moment as the women absorbed Calla's words. She could see the wheels turning in their minds. It wasn't that Calla had all the answers, she was still learning herself. But she had found something that worked, and now she was eager to help others find their own paths to health. Over the next few weeks, Calla became a gentle guide for the women in her group. She wasn't lecturing them on diets or exercise routines. She was simply sharing her story, reminding them that they didn't need to be perfect, just consistent. She offered little tips on how she made her meals easier, how she had gradually added garlic to her daily routine, and how walking for just 10 minutes a day had begun to change everything. At first, the women were hesitant. It was hard to imagine that something as simple as garlic could have such an impact. But Calla didn't rush them or pressure them. She simply encouraged them to try, to take one step at a time. Slowly, they started to make small changes in their own lives. Some added garlic to their meals, others started taking daily walks, and a few even began meal prepping on weekends. 1 month later, the group gathered again, and the changes were already evident. Patricia had started walking every morning, and she shared that she felt more energized than she had in years. Margaret, who had struggled with high blood pressure, reported that her latest doctor's visit showed a noticeable improvement. "I don't know if it's the garlic or just being more mindful of what I eat," Margaret said with a laugh, "but I'm feeling better, and that's enough for me." Calla listened to their stories with a full heart, knowing that her journey had sparked something in others. It wasn't about fixing everything overnight, it was about inspiring others to believe in their own ability to make small changes, just as she had done. And as the women shared their progress, Calla realized that her own transformation had become more than just a personal victory. It had become a shared experience, a ripple of change spreading through the people she cared about. As the months went by, Calla's confidence grew, not just in her health, but in her ability to help others. She had found a community, a circle of women who supported and encouraged each other, and in return, she gave them the most powerful gift she had, her own story. By simply sharing what she had learned, Calla had created a space where change was possible, where the journey didn't have to be walked alone. Sitting on her porch one evening, watching the sunset with Daisy by her side, Calla couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She had started with garlic, but it had led her to something far more meaningful, a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to herself and others, and a life filled with possibility. And that, she realized, was the greatest transformation of all. Calla had always been someone who prided herself on being independent, but the past few months had shown her something important. She didn't have to go through this journey alone. Her commitment to her health had sparked not only a personal transformation, but had also helped build a support system around her. As she looked back on the path she had taken, she marveled at how far she had come. The woman who once felt defeated by fatigue, who saw her health slipping away, was now a woman who stood confidently on the other side of her struggles, stronger and more aware of her own power. One rainy afternoon, as she sat by the window with a cup of tea, Calla reflected on the changes she had embraced. Life had become less about perfection and more about progress. Each day, she continued to make small but meaningful decisions, adding garlic to her meals, going for her morning walks, and prioritizing sleep. But the biggest shift had been in her mindset. She no longer saw health as something that could be fixed with a quick fix or a magic pill. Instead, she understood it as a series of choices made consistently over time. She no longer feared her future, nor did she feel anxious about the gradual aging process. She had learned to embrace it. As she thought about how much had changed, Calla realized that she had also started to feel more connected to her body. The aches and pains that once seemed overwhelming were now just part of the process, part of the story of growing older. She wasn't fighting them anymore. Instead, she was working with her body, listening to it, nurturing it. The idea that health was a journey, not a destination, had become her new reality. One evening, as she prepared dinner, she found herself thinking about the lessons she had learned over the past months. It wasn't just about garlic, though that had played a big role. It was about the deeper truth that every small choice she made mattered. She had taken control of her health in a way that was both empowering and sustainable. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was thriving, not just surviving. That night, as Calla sat down to dinner with Jason, Emily, and a few close friends, she felt a quiet joy. They had all witnessed her transformation, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Jason, who had been her biggest supporter, smiled across the table. "Mom, I have to say, I'm so proud of you. You've really turned things around." Calla's heart warmed at his words. She had worked hard to get to this point, but the journey hadn't been just about her. It had been about the people around her, their support, their encouragement, and the way they celebrated her wins, no matter how small. And it had been about the way she had learned to care for herself, not just for her family or for others. She had come to understand that in order to be there for the people she loved, she had to first show up for herself. As they all dug into the healthy meal Calla had prepared, she felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. She had started this journey feeling tired, unsure, and overwhelmed. Now she sat at the table with her family, feeling more vibrant and alive than she had in years. It wasn't just the food, the garlic, or the walks, it was the sense of agency she now had over her own life. Looking ahead, Calla knew there would be challenges. Life wasn't perfect, and health was an ongoing journey. But for the first time in a long time, she felt equipped to handle whatever came her way. She had learned that no matter where you are in life, there is always room for growth, for change, for improvement. And so, as she sat there, surrounded by the people she loved, Calla made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to make those small, consistent choices. She would keep embracing the journey ahead, knowing that every step, no matter how small, was a victory in itself. The road might not always be easy, but she was no longer afraid of the future. She was ready to face it with confidence, grace, and a deep sense of self-compassion. As the months continued to roll by, Calla found herself settling into a new rhythm. Her mornings began with a light stretch and a cup of garlic-infused water, something she'd come to cherish as part of her morning ritual. She'd taken to walking with Daisy every day, and although the pace had slowed with time, she found joy in the simplicity of it. It wasn't about pushing her body to its limits. It was about moving with intention, about honoring the small victories she had achieved. And somewhere along the way, those small victories had begun to add up into something remarkable. One morning, as she walked through the park, she noticed a couple of women from her wellness group sitting on a bench, chatting. They waved as she approached, and Calla slowed her pace to join them. "How's your walk going?" one of the women, Margaret, asked, a bright smile on her face. Calla grinned, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "It's good, better than it was a few months ago," she replied. "I can't believe how much energy I have now. It's like I've been given a second wind." Margaret raised her eyebrows. "I can't believe it either. I remember when you were telling us about feeling so tired all the time. Look at you now. It's inspiring." Calla sat down on the bench beside them, a sense of pride swelling inside her. It wasn't just the garlic or the walking, it was everything. It was the way her mind had shifted, the way she had learned to stop rushing through life and instead embrace the simple pleasures, the moments of stillness, the sense of calm that had come with choosing to care for herself. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Over the weeks, Calla found herself thinking less about her body and more about the everyday moments that now filled her with a deep sense of satisfaction. She had learned that health wasn't just about avoiding illness or striving for perfection. It was about living each day with mindfulness and intention. It was the small things, the quiet actions that created a life well lived. One afternoon, Calla was in her garden, pulling weeds and trimming back the overgrown vines. She'd always loved spending time outside, but now it felt different. Her body wasn't protesting the way it used to. She was able to bend, stretch, and kneel without feeling winded or stiff. She found herself marveling at the beauty of the flowers, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the satisfaction of seeing her hard work take shape. Gardening had always been something she enjoyed, but now it felt like a true act of self-care. She was giving her body and her soul the nourishment they both craved. Later that evening, she was sitting with her family, enjoying a meal she had prepared with fresh ingredients. Her son, Jason, who had continued to support her throughout her journey, looked across the table at her with a knowing smile. "You know, Mom, I don't think I've ever seen you so at peace," he said, his voice gentle. "You seem happy, like you've finally found your balance." Calla smiled, her heart full. "I think I have," she replied softly. "I've spent so many years chasing after things, trying to do it all, and I never realized that the most important thing was simply showing up for myself. Not in big ways, but in the small, everyday choices." Jason nodded, clearly impressed by his mom's newfound perspective. "I think you've really figured something out. It's not about the big transformations, it's about the small, quiet ones. You've been changing in ways that I think you never even realized." That conversation stuck with Calla long after dinner was over. She had been so focused on making big changes, on improving her health, that she hadn't fully appreciated the subtle ways she had grown. The garlic, the walks, the meals, those were just pieces of a larger puzzle. What really mattered was the way she had learned to listen to her body, the way she had learned to be kind to herself. And in doing so, she had found something even more valuable than health: peace. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside, Calla felt a quiet joy settle over her. The path ahead would still have its challenges, of course, but she no longer feared it. She had learned that strength wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about embracing the journey with all its ups and downs. The strength she had gained was in the quiet moments, the ones where she chose herself over and over again. And in that stillness, Calla realized that her health wasn't just about how long she lived or how strong she was. It was about how she felt, day by day. And now, more than ever, she felt truly alive. Calla stood in her kitchen one Saturday morning, preparing breakfast, and for the first time in a long time, she truly appreciated the quiet simplicity of the moment. The light pouring through the window, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and the gentle hum of the world outside, all these little details that she had once overlooked now filled her heart with gratitude. She was no longer just going through the motions of life, she was truly present, savoring each moment as it came. It had been nearly 6 months since Calla first began her journey with garlic, and though it had started with a single, small change, the transformation she had undergone felt monumental. The tiredness, the anxiety, and the constant sense of urgency that once defined her life were now distant memories. She no longer found herself rushing through each day, trying to keep up with a never-ending list of tasks. Instead, she had learned to slow down, to appreciate the pace of life, and to recognize that health wasn't a destination, it was a lifelong journey of care and mindfulness. As she set the table, Daisy padded into the kitchen, tail wagging. Calla smiled and bent down to scratch the dog behind the ears. "Ready for our walk, girl?" she asked softly. Daisy responded with an enthusiastic bark, as if to say, "Of course." It was a simple routine, but it was one that Calla had come to cherish. Her walks with Daisy had become her time for reflection, a time to clear her mind and take in the beauty of the world around her. No longer did she see it as just a form of exercise. It was an opportunity for peace, a moment to reconnect with herself. That morning, as they walked through the park, Calla reflected on how much her life had shifted. She wasn't just healthier in her body, she was healthier in her spirit. The once unrelenting fatigue had been replaced by a quiet strength. Her mind, which had once been clouded with worry, was now calm, focused, and full of clarity. It wasn't just the garlic, although that had certainly played a role in her physical health. It was the series of small changes she had made, the decision to walk every morning, the commitment to eating fresh, whole foods, the decision to take time for herself and care for her well-being. It was those things that had created a foundation of health she had never known before. That afternoon, Calla met with her wellness group again. The group had become a place of community and shared growth, a place where Calla could offer her own experiences and also learn from others. She shared her progress with them, not just in terms of numbers or physical changes, but in the emotional and spiritual growth she had experienced. It was as if the healing had reached beyond her body. It had touched every part of her life. One of the women, Patricia, spoke up. "You've really transformed, Calla," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "You're not just healthier, you seem happier. You found something that works for you, and you're not holding back. I want to be like that too." Calla's heart swelled at the compliment. "It's a process," she said, her voice soft but confident. "There are no shortcuts, but if you stick with the small things, if you show up for yourself every day, it adds up. And trust me, it's worth it." As the conversation shifted to other topics, Calla sat back and took a deep breath. It wasn't just about feeling good anymore, it was about living well. She had learned to trust her body, to trust the process, and most importantly, to trust herself. The fear she had once felt about aging and health had faded, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. Later that evening, as she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset with Daisy curled up beside her, Calla marveled at how far she had come. She had started with a simple decision, a small, seemingly insignificant step to try garlic. And yet, that step had led her down a path she had never expected, one that had healed not only her body but her entire outlook on life. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that doctor's office all those months ago, uncertain and anxious about her future. She was stronger, more confident, and more at peace than she had ever been. And for the first time in years, she felt truly alive, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life with open arms. Calla knew that there would still be challenges ahead. Life wasn't perfect, and health was an ongoing journey. But now, she faced it with the knowledge that she had the tools to navigate whatever came her way. She had learned to care for herself in a way that honored both her body and her spirit, and that, she realized, was the greatest gift she could give herself. As the stars began to twinkle above, Calla smiled, grateful for the journey she had taken. It was a journey that had started with one small choice, and had led her to a life richer and fuller than she could have ever imagined. As Calla sat back, watching the sunset with Daisy curled up by her feet, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. What began as a simple choice, adding 2 cloves of garlic to her diet, had blossomed into a complete transformation. Her energy had returned, the fatigue that once weighed her down had lifted, and most importantly, her mindset had shifted. She no longer saw health as a battle or a chore, but as a series of small, mindful decisions that built a life of vitality. The other major shift for Calla was in how she viewed herself. She had moved from feeling helpless and overwhelmed by her health to embracing a sense of control and peace. It wasn't about perfection, it was about consistency, patience, and showing up for herself every day. She had learned to care for her body in a way that nourished not only her physical health, but her emotional well-being too. Now, as you watch Calla's journey unfold, perhaps there's something in her story that resonates with you. Maybe, like her, you've been overwhelmed by health concerns, or perhaps you've put yourself last for too long. It's never too late to start. Whether it's something as simple as adding garlic to your meals, taking a daily walk, or just choosing to prioritize yourself, small changes can lead to extraordinary results. The journey to health is not a race, it's a path we walk each day. And like Calla, we can choose to embrace that journey with open arms, knowing that every small step matters. Remember, the power to change is already in your hands. All you have to do is take that first step. You're stronger than you think, and the best is yet to come.